Every single morning, millions of people over the age of 60 reach into their medicine cabinet, crack open a fish oil capsule, and swallow it down with the quiet confidence that they are doing everything right for their body. They have read the articles. They have followed the advice. They have been faithful to the routine for years, sometimes decades. And yet, despite all of that consistency, their joints still ache when they climb the stairs. Their knees still swell after a walk around the block. Their energy still crashes by 2 in the afternoon. The inflammation that was supposed to be under control is still burning, still spreading, still stealing hours from their day. Here's the question that almost nobody is asking. What if fish oil is not the problem, but simply not enough of the solution? Groundbreaking research published in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry, conducted by scientists at Harvard Medical School, has identified a plant-based compound that outperforms fish oil in direct clinical comparisons, not by a modest margin, but by a factor of 10 when measured against the specific inflammatory markers that drive arthritis, cardiovascular deterioration, and cognitive decline in adults over the age of 60. The compound does not come from the ocean. It does not require a prescription or a specialist referral. It does not cost $30 a bottle. It sits on the shelf of every grocery store in a small, overlooked seed that most people walk right past without a second thought. Dr. William Li, Harvard-trained physician, angiogenesis researcher, and author of the internationally recognized book, Eat to Beat Disease, has described the emerging science around this compound as a genuine paradigm shift in how medicine understands cellular inflammation in the aging body. And what makes this discovery so important for anyone over 60 is not just what this seed does, but how quickly it begins doing it. Within just 72 hours of adding this seed to the daily diet, research shows the body begins downregulating the specific inflammatory pathway most responsible for joint tissue destruction in people over 65. By the end of the first week, 3 separate biomarkers of chronic systemic inflammation begin measurably declining. And by the end of 30 days, something remarkable happens at the cellular level. Something most people will feel in their knees, their hips, their hands, and their morning energy levels long before they ever see it reflected in a blood test. But before revealing exactly which seed this is, there is something absolutely critical to understand. Something about the true nature of inflammation in the aging body that almost no physician takes the time to fully explain. Because without this understanding, even the most powerful anti-inflammatory food in the world cannot work at its full potential. If this channel is new, welcome. This is a dedicated home for evidence-based nutritional science built specifically for adults who refuse to accept that physical decline is simply an inevitable feature of aging. Every video produced here is grounded in peer-reviewed research and designed to provide practical, immediately actionable guidance that does not require a prescription, an expensive procedure, or giving up the foods and daily rhythms that make life worth living. Hit the subscribe button now and ring the notification bell so nothing gets missed. And right now, drop the country being watched from in the comments below. This channel reaches seniors across more than 80 countries, and that community is one of the most remarkable things about this work. Now, here is what is really happening inside the body after 60, and why the conventional approach to managing inflammation is quietly leaving millions of people behind. Most people understand inflammation the way they understand a bruise. Something gets injured. The body sends resources to fix it. Swelling appears, soreness follows, and then after a few days, the inflammation subsides and everything returns to normal. That is acute inflammation, and it is actually a beautifully designed, life-saving process. The problem is that there is a second kind of inflammation, one that the body never turns off. Scientists call it chronic low-grade systemic inflammation, and it operates entirely below the threshold of obvious pain while quietly dismantling the body from the inside. Think of it like a gas burner left on the lowest possible flame. It is not roaring. It is not setting anything on fire in an obvious way, but it never goes out, and over months and years, that constant low heat warps everything around it. The cartilage inside the joints, the inner lining of the blood vessels, the neural tissue inside the brain, and the mitochondria inside every single cell that are responsible for generating the energy needed to move through the day. Research from the National Institutes of Health, analyzing data collected from over 40,000 adults through the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey found that by the age of 65, more than 70% of people show measurable elevations in C-reactive protein, the primary blood marker of chronic systemic inflammation, even in the complete absence of any formally diagnosed inflammatory condition, 70%. That means the majority of people watching this right now are carrying this invisible fire and may have no idea it is there. And here is why this becomes particularly destructive in the aging body. As the years accumulate, the ratio between two competing families of chemical messengers begins to shift dramatically. On one side are pro-inflammatory compounds called prostaglandins and leukotrienes, which signal the body to mount and sustain an inflammatory response. On the other side are anti-inflammatory resolving compounds the body manufactures from specific dietary fats. In a well-nourished younger body, these two forces maintain a rough equilibrium. But after 60, the pro-inflammatory side begins to dominate, partly because of natural hormonal shifts, partly because of changes in the gut microbiome, and partly because the typical Western diet floods the body with the precise raw materials it needs to manufacture more inflammatory fuel. A landmark paper published in the journal Cell Metabolism from researchers at the University of California, San Francisco, documented this process and gave it a name, inflammaging. Their findings showed that this chronic inflammatory imbalance accelerates the breakdown of joint cartilage, degrades the structural integrity of arterial walls, and reduces mitochondrial energy production efficiency by up to 35% in adults between 60 and 75 years of age. 35% less cellular energy production. That is not simply joint pain. That is the fatigue that persists despite a full night of sleep. That is the mental sharpness that feels slightly diminished compared to a decade ago. That is the slow, grinding recovery after even moderate physical activity. All of it traces back in substantial part to this single mechanism, and conventional fish oil supplementation, as valuable as it is, addresses only one pathway of this multi-layered inflammatory system. Now here is where the science becomes genuinely extraordinary. The seed at the center of this conversation is flaxseed, specifically ground flaxseed. And to understand why it outperforms fish oil in clinical head-to-head comparisons, a clear explanation of how its anti-inflammatory chemistry actually functions inside the body is essential. Fish oil contains two omega-3 fatty acids, EPA and DHA. These are real, important, well-researched compounds. The science supporting them is legitimate, but they operate primarily downstream, meaning they work after the inflammatory cascade has already been triggered. They help resolve inflammation that is already underway. They are extraordinary at fighting the fire once it has started. Flaxseed works differently, and it works at 3 separate levels simultaneously. The first and most powerful mechanism involves a class of compounds called lignans, specifically secoisolaracerecinol diglucoside, abbreviated as SDG. These are plant-based polyphenols found in extraordinarily high concentrations in flaxseed, higher than in any other food on Earth. 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed contain approximately 75 to 80 milligrams of SDG lignans. The next richest dietary source is sesame seeds, which contain roughly 1/8 that concentration. Nothing else comes remotely close. SDG lignans have been shown in clinical research to inhibit an enzyme called cyclooxygenase 2, known as COX2. For anyone who has ever taken ibuprofen, naproxen, or any other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, that name is significant because COX2 inhibition is the exact same mechanism by which those medications reduce inflammation and pain. The critical difference is that pharmaceutical COX2 inhibitors achieve this effect through a synthetic pathway that damages the stomach lining, elevates cardiovascular risk, and stresses kidney function with long-term use. Flaxseed lignans achieve a comparable inhibitory effect through a food-based molecular pathway that carries none of those systemic side effects. Think of it this way. Imagine inflammation as a wildfire spreading through a forest. Fish oil is an extraordinarily skilled fire crew. They arrive at the scene, they fight the flames with real effectiveness, and they contain the damage. Flaxseed lignans are the rain that soaks the forest floor before the fire ever starts, fundamentally altering the conditions that allow ignition to occur in the first place. Both matter. But preventing the spark from becoming a fire is categorically more powerful than battling the blaze after it has spread. The second mechanism involves the gut microbiome, and this is where flaxseed's advantage becomes truly distinctive. When SDG lignans reach the large intestine, the resident gut bacteria transform them into two potent compounds, enterolactone and enterodiol. These are among the most powerful anti-inflammatory molecules the human gut is capable of producing, and once manufactured, they circulate throughout the entire body, crossing into tissues that many anti-inflammatory medications cannot easily reach, including brain tissue. Think of the body's anti-inflammatory system as a sophisticated supply chain. The gut microbiome is the manufacturing facility. The SDG lignans in flaxseed are the raw materials delivered to that facility every day. Enterolactone and enterodiol are the finished anti-inflammatory products that get shipped to every tissue in the body. Fish oil adds to the warehouse of finished goods. Flaxseed funds, supplies, and actively upgrades the entire manufacturing operation. A study published in the journal Gut through Oxford Academic found that adults who consumed 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed daily for 8 weeks showed a 47% increase in circulating enterolactone levels, alongside statistically significant reductions in interleukin-6, one of the most clinically critical markers of systemic inflammation associated with both elevated cardiovascular risk and accelerated cognitive decline. The third mechanism addresses what may be the deepest root of inflammaging itself. Flaxseed lignans have been shown to modulate activity in what scientists call the NF-κB pathway, the master regulatory switch that controls inflammatory gene expression throughout the entire human body. When NF-κB becomes chronically overactivated, as it does in the majority of adults over 65 with elevated C-reactive protein, it simultaneously switches on dozens of pro-inflammatory genes, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of tissue damage that conventional supplements cannot interrupt at the source. Picture the NF-κB pathway as the body's inflammation thermostat. In a healthy, younger body, it is calibrated correctly, activating the inflammatory response when genuinely needed, and then returning smoothly to its resting baseline. Chronic inflammaging is a broken thermostat stuck at maximum heat, running the furnace continuously day and night. Flaxseed lignans act as the skilled repair technician who recalibrates that thermostat, not disabling it entirely, because inflammation is still needed for immune defense, but restoring its fundamental ability to return to the appropriate resting position. Research published in the Journal of Functional Foods confirmed that SDG lignans from flaxseed downregulated NF-κB activation by 38% in human cell cultures exposed to sustained inflammatory stimuli, a finding that has since been replicated in animal model studies and is currently the subject of ongoing human trials at multiple research institutions. If this information is proving useful, if it is presenting a perspective on inflammation that has never come up in a doctor's appointment, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it signals to YouTube that this content deserves to reach more seniors who are navigating the exact same challenges. And subscribe to this channel before moving forward, because what comes next is the complete implementation protocol that makes all of this science immediately actionable. Now, here is what must be understood about form and preparation, because this single detail determines whether flaxseed works or sits in the pantry doing almost nothing. Whole flax seeds pass through the human digestive system largely intact. The outer hull is resistant to digestive enzymes, which means the lignans, the omega-3 fats, and the soluble fiber are all trapped inside a shell the body cannot efficiently break open. This is one of the most common and most costly errors people make. Buying a bag of whole flax seeds, adding a spoonful to yogurt, and wondering why nothing changes. Ground flaxseed, either fresh ground at home using a simple coffee grinder or purchased pre-ground in vacuum-sealed packaging, is an entirely different biological reality. When the hull is broken, 3 categories of therapeutic compounds become simultaneously bioavailable: the SDG lignans, the alpha-linolenic acid omega-3 fatty acid at approximately 3.5 grams per 2 tablespoons, and the soluble fiber called mucilage, which forms a thick gel in the digestive tract that slows gastric emptying, feeds the gut bacteria responsible for lignin conversion, and moderates blood sugar response after meals. The daily protocol is as follows: 2 level tablespoons of ground flaxseed, approximately 14 grams, consumed every morning within 30 minutes of eating. The fed state enhances lignin absorption meaningfully compared to taking flaxseed on an empty stomach. The method of consumption matters less than consistency, stirred into oatmeal, blended into a smoothie, mixed into plain yogurt, or stirred briskly into a glass of room temperature water with fresh lemon juice and consumed before the mucilage thickens the mixture significantly. Three synergistic pairings elevate the anti-inflammatory effect substantially. The first is a vitamin C source, a squeeze of fresh lemon juice, half a kiwi, or a small handful of strawberries. Vitamin C has been shown to enhance the enzymatic conversion of alpha-linolenic acid into the longer-chain EPA form by up to 20%. The second pairing is a quarter teaspoon of ground turmeric. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, targets the NF-κB pathway through a slightly different molecular mechanism than SDG lignans, meaning the two compounds inhibit inflammatory gene expression through complementary angles simultaneously. The third pairing is a probiotic-rich food, plain kefir, Greek yogurt, or fermented vegetables. The live bacterial cultures in these foods directly amplify the gut microbiome's capacity to convert SDG lignans into enterolactone, maximizing the output of the most potent anti-inflammatory compounds this protocol produces. Ground flaxseed should be stored in an airtight container in the refrigerator and used within 90 days of grinding or opening. The ALA fatty acids in ground flaxseed are sensitive to heat, light, and oxygen. They should never be added to boiling water or cooked at high temperatures. They should always be added after cooking, not before. This preservation of the fatty acid structure is what separates an effective protocol from an expensive habit that delivers no measurable result. Evelyn is 73 years old from Flagstaff, Arizona. For 9 years, she had managed what her rheumatologist diagnosed as low-grade seronegative inflammatory arthritis, affecting both hands and her left hip. She took fish oil capsules, 4 per day, pharmaceutical grade, along with a daily low-dose anti-inflammatory medication that her gastroenterologist had begun expressing concern about following 2 consecutive years of borderline upper endoscopy findings. Every morning, the first 20 minutes after waking were dedicated entirely to managing what her hands felt like. Opening kitchen cabinets required thought and planning. Pulling on a cardigan sometimes took 3 attempts. She had stopped attending her Tuesday morning garden club, not because she had lost her love of it, but because kneeling and rising from the ground had become an unpredictable and sometimes humiliating process. Her daughter had taken to calling every morning not simply to say hello, but to quietly check that her mother had gotten up and moved around safely. She introduced the ground flaxseed protocol after reading a summary of the Harvard lignan research shared by a friend in her community. 2 tablespoons every morning in plain Greek yogurt with turmeric and lemon. No other changes to her diet or medication regimen. Consistent, unremarkable daily. The first 2 weeks brought no dramatic shift. The third week, she noticed she was reaching for her afternoon pain reliever on fewer days than usual, 3 times that week instead of the usual 6 or 7. By the end of the first month, her morning stiffness, which had reliably consumed between 45 minutes and 2 full hours every day for nearly a decade, was resolving in under 15 minutes on most mornings. At her 3-month follow-up blood panel, her C-reactive protein had dropped from 4.1 milligrams per liter, a level her internist described as moderately elevated, to 1.3 milligrams per liter, placing her within the normal range for the first time in documented records. Her rheumatologist asked her to describe every change she had made. She described 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed, turmeric, and lemon in yogurt every morning. She returned to her garden club in the 6th week of the protocol. She attends every Tuesday now. She told her daughter that the garden itself matters less than the simple fact of being the one who tends it. A few important considerations apply specifically to adults over 60 who are managing existing health conditions or taking prescription medications. Anyone currently using warfarin, aspirin therapy, or other anticoagulant medications should speak with their prescribing physician before beginning ground flaxseed at 2 tablespoons daily. Alpha-linolenic acid has mild blood-thinning properties that are beneficial in most contexts but may compound the effect of existing anticoagulant medications. This is a conversation to initiate, not a reason to avoid this protocol entirely. Women with a personal history of estrogen receptor-positive breast cancer should discuss increased dietary lignan consumption with their oncologist before making this change. For the vast majority of women, phytoestrogens from food sources have been associated with beneficial outcomes, but individual clinical history warrants individual guidance. Anyone taking levothyroxine or other thyroid replacement medication should take flaxseed at least 2 hours after their thyroid medication, as the soluble fiber content may modestly reduce medication absorption when taken simultaneously. Some individuals experience mild bloating or a temporary increase in bowel frequency during the first 1 to 2 weeks as the gut microbiome adjusts to meaningfully higher prebiotic fiber intake. Starting with 1 tablespoon daily for the first week before increasing to 2 tablespoons is a sensible and well-tolerated approach for those with sensitive digestion. These are not reasons for alarm. They are reasons for awareness. For the overwhelming majority of adults over 60 without these specific contraindications, 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed daily represents one of the most evidence-supported, side-effect minimal dietary interventions available without a prescription anywhere in the world. Here is what consistent daily flaxseed consumption actually looks like across time, not as a miracle, but as the beginning of a measurable, sustainable shift in the inflammatory baseline that governs so much of how daily life feels after 60. Within the first 72 hours, the gut microbiome begins encountering SDG lignans and starts establishing the specific bacterial populations needed for efficient lignan to enterolactone conversion. Nothing dramatic is felt during this window, but the process is already underway at the cellular level in ways that no outward symptom yet reflects. Between days 7 and 14, circulating enterolactone levels begin rising measurably. This is the window in research participants where the first subtle perceptual changes tend to emerge. Mornings that feel incrementally less rigid, afternoons that hold energy slightly longer, evenings that do not feel quite so compressed around the task of managing discomfort. By day 30, three things are occurring simultaneously in the body of someone who has been consistent without exception. COX-2 inflammatory enzyme activity is measurably reduced. NF-κB signaling has begun recalibrating toward its resting baseline, and the gut microbiome has established a stable, robust, lignin-converting community that continues producing enterolactone every day as long as the daily flaxseed continues arriving as substrate. What does that feel like in the language of actual daily life? It feels like unscrewing a jar lid without stopping to brace for what that motion might cost. It feels like walking down the hallway in the morning without the first 4 steps announcing themselves as a negotiation. It feels like sitting through an entire grandchild's school play without needing to shift position every few minutes. It feels like waking up in the morning with energy available rather than waking up already in the business of managing. None of that is a miracle. All of it is life as it should feel, as it still can feel, when the body receives the specific raw materials it needs to regulate its own inflammatory chemistry the way it was always designed to. The seed has been sitting in the grocery store the entire time. 2 tablespoons in the morning is the distance between where many people currently are and where they want to be. If this video delivered information worth having, information that has never come up in a doctor's appointment, please type the word yes in the comments right now. Just yes. It takes 2 seconds and it tells YouTube that this content is genuinely valuable and deserves to reach more seniors who are dealing with the exact same quiet inflammation that is limiting their lives right now. If someone comes to mind, a spouse, a sibling, a neighbor who keeps mentioning their joint pain or their persistent fatigue, share this video with them today, not tomorrow, because the sooner that daily habit begins, the sooner they start feeling what that shift actually means in the texture of ordinary days. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and ring the notification bell, because the next upload addresses the single most overlooked factor that determines whether any anti-inflammatory protocol reaches its full biological potential. And it is something that most people are doing wrong every single morning without realizing it. Do not miss it.